Hello. In the annals of America's mysterious incidents, no event related to aliens or flying objects has captured the attention of America itself, or the entire world, quite like the incident that occurred in the American city of Roswell in the mid-20th century. The city of Roswell is a remote city in the state of New Mexico. In the 1940s, the American government chose it to be a launch site for nuclear missiles during the Cold War between them and the Soviet Union. But what they hadn't accounted for was that at the end of the 1940s, an event would occur that would change the balance of everything and transform this remote and secret city into the most famous site for observing mysterious flying objects in the entire world. So, what exactly happened? Welcome, and today I'm going to tell you about the Roswell Incident. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell to be notified of our new story every week. About a week before the Roswell Incident, a very important event took place. On June 24, 1947, American pilot Kenneth Arnold took off in his plane heading for the city of Yakima in Washington. Midway through the journey, he decided to change his flight path and head towards the Cascade Mountains to search for a missing U.S. Navy plane, hoping to find its wreckage and claim a reward. While flying near Mount Rainier, he saw a shining object amidst the clouds, flying at an altitude of approximately 3 kilometers at a speed of up to 1,900 kilometers per hour, an incredible speed by all standards at the time. Here, Kenneth decided to follow the path of this strange object from behind the clouds, hoping to get a better look at what it was. To his surprise, it wasn't just one object. They were 9 metallic objects flying in the sky, the likes of which he had never seen before in his life. Due to their immense speed, he couldn't keep up with them for more than 2 minutes before they completely disappeared from his sight. Of course, what Kenneth saw terrified him, and he decided not to continue the exploratory trip he had planned. He flew on to Yakima as he was originally supposed to. As soon as he landed his plane there, he ran to his colleagues and the airport officials to tell them about the strange experience he had during his flight. The way he described the objects he saw caused a state of panic among everyone who heard him. Kenneth recounted, with terror etched on his face, that the objects were not like any known aircraft of the time. They were flat, circular objects made of a strange, light-reflecting metal with a diameter of about 15 to 30 meters. They had no wings or engines to help them fly, yet they were flying through the air at enormous speeds and could move in a zigzag or skipping motion, like a stone when you skim it across the water's surface. The precision of the description and his fear while telling the story made many people believe what he was saying. The story began to spread from one person to another until it was known by everyone at the airport at the time. Some of them advised him not to stay silent about what he had seen. Indeed, he took their advice, and the next day he went to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and several government agencies, including the military, and submitted a detailed report about what he had seen. Due to the very strange nature of the incident, the matter received significant media attention. Newspapers began to write reports based on Kenneth's description with headlines like, "Flying Saucer Coming from Outer Space." This was the first time in history that the term flying saucers appeared. Days passed and people were divided into 2 groups. A group that believed in the existence of flying saucers and another group that was not convinced that such a thing existed. Until July 2, 1947, the day the city of Roswell witnessed a severe thunderstorm, the worst in the city's history since it was founded. On this day, the U.S. Army airfield near the city detected strange flashes on its radar, the source of which no one knew exactly, as if objects were penetrating the sky amidst the lightning. The same phenomenon was detected by the White Sands Missile Range, which is one of their largest military bases. And not only that, but the same flashes were detected by the nuclear testing facility located about 145 kilometers southwest of Roswell. What was even stranger was that they all reported that the objects were moving at a terrifying speed, appearing and disappearing in a matter of seconds over the Roswell area. This caused a state of panic in the 509th Bombardment Group, the unit responsible for deploying nuclear weapons which had dropped the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki just 2 years earlier, and which was based in Roswell at the time. Of course, all the responsible authorities were afraid that what was happening was a threat to the region's security. But due to the poor weather conditions, they were helpless and couldn't do anything as they watched these objects appear and disappear on the radar. A few hours passed, and a call came in to the officer on duty in Roswell, George Wilcox, from one of Roswell's own residents. He said that while he and his wife were standing at their window watching the lightning, they noticed a shiny, oval-shaped object flying in the sky at a very high speed. It passed over their house and fell on their neighbor's car at a speed faster than any plane they had ever seen. Wilcox at the time was not convinced by what they were saying and told them it might have been something blown onto their property by the ongoing storm. He reassured them and hung up. But after this call, dozens of calls began to come in from other people reporting that they were seeing strange, shiny objects appearing in the sky, but due to their high speed, they couldn't determine their exact shape. Since Wilcox didn't know what it was, his response to people was always that it might be aircraft from the nearby airbase. Until he received a report that made him change his mind about everything. About 150 kilometers north of Roswell, specifically on a large ranch in Lincoln County, a farmer named Mac Brazel found the wreckage of a strange metallic object that had fallen on his land. Since he had heard the news spreading everywhere about the strange objects people were seeing, he took a piece of this wreckage in his car and went to Sheriff George Wilcox's office on July 7, 1947. There he told Wilcox that he had found huge strips of metal tied together that had fallen on his land. He told him he suspected it was the wreckage of a flying saucer like the ones people were talking about in the newspapers and showed him the piece he had brought with him in the car. Because Wilcox was originally an Army officer, he was familiar with the metals used in aircraft manufacturing. And the metal Brazel had was not like any of them. While Brazel was telling him what he had seen, a call came in from a journalist at a local newspaper asking for any new updates. So, Wilcox told him about Brazel and the metal he had found on his land. The journalist, whose name was Frank, couldn't believe what he heard and told him it was surely the wreckage of a normal plane and that he should report it to the military and confirm first before creating any commotion. Accordingly, Wilcox contacted Colonel Butch Blanchard at the 509th Military Base and told him the story. When Blanchard received the news, he took it as it was and passed it on to General Roger W. Ramey, who immediately gave orders to one of his intelligence officers to go to the site of the wreckage and inspect the matter himself. On the morning of July 8th, news reached the journalist Frank that the U.S. government, for the first time in its history, believed it had in its possession a flying saucer from outer space. As soon as Frank received the news, he immediately broadcast it on the local radio station in Roswell. Within a few hours, the story was published on the front page of the local newspaper, Roswell Daily Record. Because this was the first time the U.S. government had acknowledged the existence of flying saucers, the world was in an uproar. The news spread to all the newspapers, and from American newspapers, it was transmitted to international newspapers within a few hours. People began to connect this news with the sightings that had occurred over the past months. People started talking again about the incident with Kenneth Arnold, the pilot who had seen flying saucers a few days earlier. Hours passed, and before the day was over, people were surprised by a press conference that would turn the tables and become the cause of hundreds of conspiracy theories. With the commotion that had occurred worldwide after the news spread, General Roger Ramey ordered the transfer of the wreckage from the site where it was discovered to his office in Fort Worth, Texas. A few hours later, he appeared in a press conference before the whole world and said that the news that had been published a few hours ago was a mistake for which the government was responsible, and it stemmed from haste and misjudgment. He stated there was no such thing as flying saucers from space, and that the wreckage they found was the remains of a weather balloon. After the conference, a picture was published of the intelligence officer the general had sent, standing next to pieces of the wreckage, with a caption stating that Officer Jesse Marcel had made a mistake in identifying the source of the wreckage when he first inspected it. A few days later, a confession from Mac Brazel, the only civilian witness, was published, in which he confirmed the government's statement and said that the metal pieces he found were not strange at all. He was just scared because of the news that it was spreading at the time, nothing more. After the government's statement and Brazel's confession, public interest in the Roswell incident greatly diminished, Many people began to be convinced that it was indeed just an unintentional mistake. This was despite many reports of strange sightings in the region's sky, including a report in the 1950s from people who said they saw strange creatures descending from the sky with large skulls and small bodies. But every time, the government's response was always the same, that nothing like that had happened and that there was no contact between us and any other extraterrestrial worlds. Until we reached the year 1978, when nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman appeared and decided to delve into the details of the Roswell incident once again. He conducted several interviews with witnesses who knew the details of the story, the most important of whom was intelligence officer Jesse Marcel. Jesse, at that time, was already a retired officer and didn't care about anything. From his point of view, he was ready to tell the truth to clear his conscience. And the words he spoke at that time turned the world upside down. Jesse confessed that he was certain the metal pieces he saw in Roswell did not match any metal used in military equipment. In fact, it was unlike any metal he had ever seen before in his life. The sheets were very thin, but at the same time, they were strong and durable, to the extent that if you hit them with a large hammer, they wouldn't be affected or even scratched. And if you used fire on them, they wouldn't melt. What was even stranger was that they were so flexible that you could crumple them all in the palm of your hand like paper, and as soon as you let go, they would return to their original shape. He said at the time that he was sure this metal was not from Earth. A haze. And it wasn't just Jesse who confirmed that something suspicious was happening in the Roswell incident. Friedman conducted interviews with many other witnesses, both civilian and military, and they all confirmed that there was a massive cover-up of what happened in Roswell. Years passed, and many theories emerged accusing the American government of being in contact with other beings from outside of Earth, and that these beings were more advanced than us and had modern technology. And the Americans were keeping it a secret so that they alone could benefit from this technology. Until in 1994, the U.S. Air Force issued a report in which it admitted that what happened in 1947 in Roswell was indeed a cover-up. But it was a cover-up of the balloon that had exploded, not a cover-up of aliens or anything of the sort. This was because the balloon that exploded at the time was part of a huge secret program called Project Mogul. They said that after World War II, they had great fear of nuclear weapons. So they decided to create giant balloons that would fly at very high altitudes and plant microphones in them to detect the sound waves emitted by atomic bomb tests, so they could detect any plans by the Soviet Union early on. And because the balloon's explosion could have revealed the secret of the project, they promoted the idea that it was a spaceship. But at the same time, they did not expect the news to create such a huge stir, so they backtracked on their words again and admitted it was a balloon, but they did not give any more details about it. All they said was that it was a weather balloon. The reason they decided to admit this at that time was that the project had been stopped long ago due to its high costs, and there would be no harm to them if the secret were revealed now. After this statement, the General Accounting Office of the U.S. Congress began an investigation into all government records related to the Roswell incident to determine whether these records had been handled correctly or not. In 1995, a report was published by the U.S. Air Force titled The Roswell Report: Truth versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert. The report stated that the findings did indeed support the balloon theory, and there was no evidence of the existence of flying saucers or alien creatures or anything of the sort. As for the witnesses who claimed to have seen alien bodies, the report said that these were confused memories, and what they had actually seen were crash test dummies used in later military experiments. The story of the flying saucer was the best way for the government to divert attention from the real plan. However, a man named Donald Schmitt, who considers himself a researcher in the field of unidentified flying objects and who spent about 30 years of his life investigating this case, then appeared and said that Roger Ramey and Congress's explanation was not logical at all, and actually contradicted the goal they claimed to be pursuing. Because for a secret area like this, where an important experiment like that is being conducted, they shouldn't be drawing the public's attention to it. Because when you say there are alien objects in a certain place, people will be drawn to that place and will be curious to explore it themselves. So if the government really thought that the story of the flying saucers would divert eyes away from them, it was a stupid plan and most likely not true. After this, many theories emerged trying to explain what happened in Roswell. Among them was the theory proposed in the book, Area 51, An Uncensored History, which says that the flying saucer was not made by aliens, nor by American spies, or anything of the sort. It was a plan executed by the Soviet leader at the time, Joseph Stalin, to instill fear in the hearts of the Americans. The book's author, journalist Annie Jacobson, said that she received information from an engineer who was working in Area 51 at the time of the incident, but he, of course, refused to reveal his identity. He told her that during the period when the incident occurred, the Soviets were witnessing a project that was conducting illegal experiments on children. When a group of children suffered strange deformities, such as enlarged skulls or pale skin color, they transported them in a secret plane and took them to New Mexico in America to scare people with them and make them believe more in the alien theory. After this theory spread, many people considered it an explanation for the words written by the son of Officer Jesse Marcel in his book, The Roswell Legacy, in which he said that his father, after going out to inspect the wreckage at the Brazel Ranch, secretly took a piece of it and brought it home to keep as a souvenir. One day, his son took the piece from him and looked at it and found that there was writing on it in an incomprehensible language. Since he was only 11 years old at the time, he couldn't investigate the matter further. After that, his father took the piece and never brought it back home again. Up to this point, most of the theories were leaning towards the incident being a political one with no connection to alien creatures. But in 2019, a book was published by two researchers, Thomas Carey and Donald Schmidt, titled Witness to Roswell, Unmasking the Government's Biggest Cover-Up. The book was filled with testimonies from eyewitnesses, numbering more than 600 from civilians and military personnel, including the journalist Frank, the first one to know the news. He said that when Mac Brazel went to the office to report the wreckage he had with him, he was certain that the metal he had was not natural. When Frank himself didn't believe the story over the phone, Brazel took the receiver and kept insisting that the wreckage was indeed made of a strange metal he had never seen before. But then, orders came from a higher authority that they should not talk about the subject. A short period later, Brazel completely changed his story and denied that the wreckage was made of a strange metal. But the strange thing about the matter is that the neighbor said that his life changed completely after the incident. He bought a new car, left his job as a shepherd and farmer, and started trading and traveling. According to his family, Brazel was detained until he changed his statement. Furthermore, the residents themselves confirmed that the army was giving them orders to remain silent if they sensed anything strange happening in the area, or they would be expelled from their homes. This was confirmed by the testimony of the daughter of Air Force Officer Hunter Penn, who said that her father confessed to her one day that he was tasked with imposing sanctions on anyone who tried to transfer information related to this subject, and that he was also allowed to use his weapon if necessary. Another thing they were able to find was a sealed letter from Walter Haut, the officer who had informed the journalists that there was a flying saucer, with instructions that it should not be opened until after his death. They found in it a confession that the picture taken at General Ramey's office was a hoax, and that they had replaced the original wreckage with parts of a destroyed weather balloon and took pictures next to it just to reassure the people. He also confessed that he had heard information from security sources confirming the existence of the small, strange creatures that people were talking about. And it wasn't just Walter. Retired Brigadier General Arthur E. Exon and Technical Sergeant Herschel Grace also said the same thing. One of the flight engineers, who was one of those responsible for receiving the wreckage, confessed in 2008 that when he said back then that the wreckage was from a weather balloon, it was a statement made under threat, but he couldn't stay silent any longer. The truth was that it was the wreckage of a strange spaceship, and that to this day he can't comprehend how it was flying without engines. That's it. These were not the only pieces of evidence that cast doubt on the Roswell incident. There are dozens, even hundreds of others. And although the internet is full of videos of aliens being autopsied, with claims that these bodies were discovered in Roswell, all these videos are fake. To this day, no one knows exactly what the secret of what happened in Roswell is. Were they strange objects that did indeed penetrate our atmosphere? Or was it all stories fabricated by the Americans, as usual? And with that, we reach the end of the story. I'm waiting for your opinions, and if you have a story you want us to tell, write it in the comments. The idea that gets the most interaction, I will work on, God willing. Show me your support now with a subscription, a like, a comment, and all that good stuff. Share the video with anyone you think will like it. I'll see you next time with a story even more thrilling than the last. Peace.